Well, I'm a small business owner. Started my company, C Forward, in 1999, just before Y2K. So we're an IT company, so that was a very exciting time for us, as you can imagine. I started off with just one employee, myself. Grew the business. We're over 32 employees now, with locations in Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati, and now Lexington. We just did a ribbon cutting with Commerce Lexington last week, and it's a lot of fun. And now that I am stepping away from that organization, stepping into this role as chamber president, I'm really looking forward to working with all the businesses, large and small, to try to make our collective economy better. I've got two young daughters, one 16, one 12. We live in Fort Thomas. My wife, Lisa. Lisa is the director of the Area Development District.
So you've been interim director of the Northern Kentucky Chamber before. You've been very involved in the region for a while, but now you're fully taking on this new role. So, what led you to this point, and what's your vision now that you are at the helm of this organization?
Sure. Well, there's three things that we're trying to accomplish here at the Chamber. We lead, we connect, and we advocate. And that's our mission, to grow the collective economy and try to improve the quality of life for everyone here in Northern Kentucky and the state of Kentucky as a whole. So we're trying to, everything that we do, we want to drive towards those things. So we're very involved with Leadership Northern Kentucky, regional youth leadership. We're very involved with trying to connect folks, bring folks into the Chamber of Commerce, connect them with vendors, connect them with customers, all the different programming that we have. We're going to be doing some really exciting things. And then our advocacy efforts, and we work very closely with the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce to try to make advocacy decisions and policy decisions that will benefit the entire economy in the state and try to push us in the right direction.
So, like we talked about, you have been in this role before, interim director, though. And so when they asked you to take this position, what went into making the final decision that you wanted to be the head of the Northern Kentucky Chamber? Sure.
Well, I want to make a difference for our local economy and for our collective community. I mean, I think the chambers of commerce all around the state chamber being the biggest, they make a difference in a positive way for our communities, and I wanted to be a part of that. A lot of people don't know that I couldn't actually say yes. Even though we went through this long search process and a lot of interviews, the committee knew that I couldn't actually answer yes until I talked to my company, until I talked to a family and friends. But my very first call was actually to Dave Atkinson at the State Chamber. And by the way, congratulations on winning Chamber of the Year. And I think that's an example for the rest of the chambers around the state. Dave has been a wonderful mentor, a friend, and a guiding force for a lot of us in the business community. I wanted to know what he thought, if this was the right decision, both for me personally and for our Chamber of Commerce. And he's been extremely supportive. He was that day, but even since then, he's been offering guidance and counsel, and we really appreciate it. I look at other chambers of commerce around the state, Bob Quick in Lexington, Kent Euler in Louisville. We all collectively kind of look to the state chamber and Dave Atkinson specifically for that guidance, and he's been wonderful.
Well, you talked about bringing people together, and you talked about, the things that the chamber does in the region, but all chambers, especially, statewide and local chambers, have a hard time telling people what we do. It's hard for people to understand exactly what the chamber does and who's at the table during these discussions. A lot of people think it's government, but what do you want people to know about the Northern Kentucky Chamber, who's involved, and, what's your mission?
Sure, yeah. So our board is made up of small businesses and large businesses. Really, when you look at it, it's primarily small businesses. The majority of our chamber members, we're over 1,400 chamber members representing over 200,000 employees. The vast majority come from small businesses. And I think part of why I was selected for this role was because I come from that perspective as well. And so, our board talks about the issues of the day. We look at the major challenges that are facing us, and we make individual decisions on each issue. What is going to be the best for our collective economy? How can we move our region forward and our state forward? And that's really not unlike the state chamber. Like, as you mentioned, all the chambers of commerce kind of all work that way. And as I sit on the state chamber board, there were small businesses, there were large businesses, a big diversity of regional representation. We do the same thing locally. We have folks from all the different cities, all the different counties, ranging different industries, manufacturing, healthcare, IT, and so forth. And the state chamber does that as well on our board. And that's one of the things we want to continue to do. We want to have a diversity of opinions, all looking at the issues. We can collectively agree and come to consensus on the best things that are going to move the state forward.
Northern Kentucky is a little bit different than some of the other regions in Kentucky. You know, you guys have some different priorities. So what is the main focus for you guys currently, and what are some of the biggest initiatives that you'll be pushing for now?
Sure. Well, the elephant in the room is the pension issue, and we are lockstep with the state chamber on that issue, trying to find solutions, get everyone to come together and you know, solve that big elephant of an issue. And then, of course, tax reform. We're looking at tax policies that will make us more competitive. There are a number of issues we have in this neck of the woods, whereas we are, as you mentioned, right next to Ohio and Cincinnati. While we work collaboratively with them, we also, when it comes to tax policy, want to make sure that we're not in a worse economic situation than on that side of the river. So we want to be competitive. We're also looking at a variety of public policy issues, a lot of regional issues. One in particular that we're fighting right now is a reformulated gas issue. Cincinnati does not have that reformulated gas requirement, even though they are 1.7 of the 2.1 million that live in our region. Yet we do, and so it's something we're trying to eliminate, get rid of. That's 22 cents per gallon per citizen. So that's a big deal for Northern Kentucky businesses. Collectively, $41 million will be saved if we can eliminate that requirement. And then there's a whole slew of things. Workforce is our #1 issue. I know areas around the state, Bowling Green and Louisville, workforce seems to bubble up as the #1 issue for us as well. And there's a lot of things that drive that. For us, transportation, education, healthcare, the health of our citizens really impacts Northern Kentucky. So from an advocacy standpoint, we will be working with the state chamber and the other chambers around the state to try to attack those issues and make our economy better.
Now, something the Kentucky Chamber has been talking about, especially recently when you talk about workforce, is the opioid epidemic, you know, and Northern Kentucky has been hit very hard with that as well.
Yes.
So is that a focus for you all as well?
Absolutely. No, it's a major concern, and we continue to work with our local and state officials to address it. I think, you know, our board came out and advocated quite a few years ago for treatment centers and for additional resources to fight the opioid epidemic. It is a real problem here. And as part of our collective health issue, it keeps coming up. Employers bring it up regularly about how they can't find people, and that is certainly part of the problem.
Now, like you said, you are a small business owner, and now you're, you know, in this new role representing a lot of businesses. So is there anything that you want people to really understand about, you know, what businesses are facing and what the chamber is trying to do? Sure.
Yeah, I think I always call it the circle of life when you look at our collective economy. So why does it matter that we get a new airline at the airport? Southwest, for example, came to CVG this year, and we just got WOW Airlines, which now you can fly $200 round trip to Reykjavik, Iceland, or $300 to fly to London. Why does that matter to a Northern Kentucky small business, as an example? But well, because we get these foreign companies that will come in because maybe they have a direct flight, or maybe because they have a low-cost flight that will come here and set up shop. And then they use the local vendors for their food, for their entertainment, for their IT services. We do work for a London-based company, a German manufacturer. Even though Northern Kentucky is 20% of Greater Cincinnati, we represent 35% of the manufacturing jobs, just as an example. So it's that circle of life. It's bringing businesses into the region, and our Chamber of Commerce looks at that, looks at how can we collectively make our economy better so that the small business and large businesses can all grow together and prosper. And that's kind of our philosophy.
So we just talked about the fact that the Kentucky Chamber, the Northern Kentucky Chamber, none of us are part of government, even though that's kind of a common misconception. But we do work closely with legislators and in the legislative process to make sure that bills get passed that are friendly to business. So talk to me a little bit about how you guys work with the Northern Kentucky legislators.
Yeah, we have a really good relationship with our Northern Kentucky legislators, a great group of folks, and a constant regular dialogue on the issues. And now that, as you mentioned, they're in leadership positions, we have had a wonderful time. We do a great job working with them on key issues. And I look at the folks down the list, you know, Brian Lindner, Diane St. Onge, Adia Wishner, Sal Santora heading up transportation. Adam Koenig just got the MVP award from the state chamber. Wonderful legislators. And then, of course, Senator McDaniel heading up A&R. They all talk to us on a regular basis. They're concerned about business issues. They champion issues that we have been championing for over a decade, things like prevailing wage and right to work. So those were things that will have a dramatic impact on our collective economy, and frankly already have. right here in Northern Kentucky. We've seen a lot of savings, and I just talked about the number of schools that we'll be able to build this year without raising taxes because of the prevailing wage rule. So, I mean, these are really good common sense business issues that they champion, and so we're really proud of our caucus.
And you talk about how we've already seen changes after the 2017 session, you know, bringing in more investment. We have Amazon now in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit more about, you know, what Northern Kentucky is seeing recently in terms of growth.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of good news these days. You mentioned Amazon. You know, over half the flights at CVG are cargo flights. And we now employ over 1,500 people at FedEx, over 3,000 at DHL, and now Amazon coming in. I think we employ more Amazon employees in the state of Kentucky than any other state in the country outside of Washington. So it's pretty impressive. But we're seeing new companies come in, like CTI does clinical trials, average salary of $80,000, and they're going to have over 750 employees down in the River Center right here in Covington. We're looking at Southwest, just came to CVG, the impact that will have. Of course, Delta, and you look at the other airlines, Frontier, Allegiant, these are all a lot of wonderful flights that our airport previously didn't have that now we have, and a lot of them are low-cost flights. So our airport, while it continues to increase in passenger traffic, the average flight cost has actually gone down. And now we just added WOW Airlines, so you can have a direct flight to Reykjavik, Iceland, or $300 to London or Germany. So it's a wonderful development. There's all kinds of those success stories throughout Northern Kentucky, and we're going to be talking about those at our annual dinner coming up on Thursday. But you're going to hear us talk a lot about some of the successes coming up. It's an exciting time for our economy.
Northern Kentucky has an interesting situation. Unlike a lot of the rest of the state, you border Cincinnati. I mean, that is a huge, successful city where there are a lot of jobs and a lot of people, and a situation where, you know, a lot of people may work in Northern Kentucky and, you know, live across the border or the other way around.
Yeah.
So how does that play into your policy positions, you know, what businesses want in the region, and even in terms of your transportation policies? Right,
yeah, we can't, our number one issue is workforce, and we can't have a workforce conversation without talking about transportation. I looked at some of the biggest logistics and distribution companies. That's one of our top growth areas. I mentioned FedEx, DHL, Amazon, just to name a few. All of them have half of their employees living in Ohio. And it's not just the large companies, it's smaller companies too. Like my company, for example, half our employees live in Ohio. So it's a reality. We are part of the greater Cincinnati area, and we can't have a conversation about workforce without working collaboratively on both sides of the road. We talk about co-opetition. We cooperate when we can, and we compete when we must, but we have to recognize that fact that half of our employees, whether large business or small business, are going to be coming from the Ohio side. That's why every conversation we have about workforce also involves transportation. And yes, we talk a lot about the congestion on 75. It is our number one transportation concern. We must alleviate that congestion. But we've got new developments happening in Hebron, for example, where, you know, we need transportation, roads and bridges to help solve and alleviate that congestion issue there. Florence has concerns about transportation, one of their exits. A big one in Northern Kentucky is in Newport, where the AA highway will end down at Newport on the Levee, if you've ever been there. And so that is, once that happens, the economic development explosion that's going to happen is going to go like this. As soon as those roads and bridges appear, we will see a tsunami of economic development activity. That's why it's so important for both large and small businesses, because they need to get their employees and their goods and services from point A to point B. And we can't expand without the roads and bridges and addressing the congestion issue. Now,
you guys have a big event coming up this week, so tell me a little bit about that. And this will be your first time as the leader of this organization with this.
Right, my first time as president. Yeah. We've got over 1,000 people registered now. It is going to be huge, and we're going to be recognizing some wonderful people and one terrific team. As you know, the Northern Kentucky University basketball team made the NCAA tournament for the first time, got to play UK, and so we are recognizing them with our Image Maker Award, and we're very excited about that. Coach Brennan's going to be on hand to receive that, so we're very thrilled. We're also going to be recognizing our Northern Kentucky Forum, which brings everyone together, and that's really a theme with our chamber as well. We try to bring everyone throughout the region. In Northern Kentucky, people may not know that around the state, but we are 37 cities in the 3 northernmost counties alone, and so it's a real challenge to keep everyone rowing in the same direction, and that's part of what our Chamber of Commerce tries to do and has since 1969. We're also going to be recognizing John and Jane Damasco. And Steve Harper, former chair, is going to be receiving the Pichelle Award. Part of, he is taking on the consensus committee this year, again, bringing civic leaders all together. And he's also been a champion for that reformulated gas issue that we've been fighting for years. So we're very excited to honor Steve. And so it's going to be a big night for Northern Kentucky. We're really thrilled.
Well,